The world around us is hostile to the Word of God and to biblical values, but we are called to be salt and light, to stand for truth in a decaying culture. We are not called to run from the fire, but be willing to step into the fire. God has placed you at this time in history on purpose and for a purpose. Join us as we get better equipped to address civics and culture from a biblical worldview. Welcome to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church. Let's welcome our hosts Allison Furno and Debi Vandenboom.
Today's topic is how and why to homeschool. I have with me two guests today. Allison is not here today. She had a work conflict today, but I have two guests. I have Lilly Orta with me, who's a Dream City College student, and I have Tabitha Lowder, mom, and lots of other amazing things. So I'd like you to just start by introducing yourself a little bit and tell us just who you are so that our listeners know. So Lilly, why don't you start?
Absolutely. I'm Lilly. I've was homeschooled my entire life from before school, before grades were actually a thing, and all the way through high school where I graduated. I went to community college for a year, and now I'm a Dream City College student.
Majoring in what?
Majoring in ministerial leadership.
Wonderful. All right, and Tab?
I'm Tabitha, and I am a mom to three. I've been married for 13 years and never thought I would homeschool until 2021. And the Lord just changed my heart drastically, and we've been doing this. We're in our fourth year now and having a blast.
That's wonderful. And I don't know if I don't normally talk about it on the show, but I homeschooled for over 20 years. My youngest just graduated high school this last spring. So my four daughters, we homeschooled all the way, again, before school, like preschool age, all the way through high school. And then I also teach high school math classes at a place called Ignite. That is a ministry for homeschoolers where they can sign up and take individual classes. I teach high school math classes to homeschoolers, and I've done that in some form or another since 2014. Been doing that as well. I used to be a public school teacher, and once my kids were old enough to get into school, I felt like I would be sending them to the wolves. So I just decided to homeschool, and I have also loved it. Okay, so with that, I think what's really interesting is we've all kind of had different experiences with homeschooling. You were a student homeschooling. You're fairly new. You're seasoned in that you've been doing it for several years, but you're not brand new to it. And mine are all grown, and I'm done with that. I have helped a lot of people get started in homeschooling. I think I helped you, actually, get started. Interesting.
You were one of my big inspirations. I thought if her kids turned out the way they turned out, then it's fine. So,
well, that's good. We're going to talk about all that. I'm glad. Glad that was the case. But there's lots of different ways to homeschool. I don't know. Do you what kinds of ways have you seen people do this? Just sort of in general. Anything that you can think of?
Oh, everything from sitting at the table doing 5-6 hours of schoolwork to feral children in the backyard doing whatever their little imagination thinks of. And I see the benefit and usefulness of it all. So it's very broad.
I think one of the fun things about homeschooling is there's a lot of ways that you can accommodate for different families, different parents, different kids. There's obviously the kids who, they run around outside and their homework is building a fort. Yeah. I was textbook homeschooled, so I did textbooks like my whole life, but there's online school for homeschooled. You obviously did co-ops for a long time. I knew a bunch of kids who did co-ops that were more practical. I had a friend who was in a co-op that it was practical skills. So housemaking and how to get a job and how to go to trade school. And there's also co-ops that are actual schools. So there's a lot of variety out there, depending on what the parents are good at, what the kids are good at, what fits for schedules,
and what their lifestyle is too. How much the parents are at home, what they feel like doing. I also know that a new thing that I've seen a lot of is microschools. I don't know if you know anyone that's done that. Do you know anyone that's doing that?
I mean, does it count because I know a few families, is it where they get together and they school each other's kids and
So they either school each other's kids or they hire someone to come in and do almost like a little one-room schoolhouse. I know people who've done that.
I've heard of it.
They'll have a couple of families and then they pay a tutor to come in and do school in one of the homes for 10 kids.
Is that getting more popular?
It is. Okay. It's getting more popular.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I think that's probably more the case in more affluent sort of communities and families because they can afford to pay somebody to come in and do that and set it up that way. And then you also have, families that just download everything for free on the internet. And I've known people that have done that too, that haven't paid any money at all, that they've downloaded just all of their stuff that they do, and then the whole gamut in between.
Yep.
So there's a big range of ways to homeschool. You said you did textbooks, right? So what was your normal homeschool day like when you were little? Let's start with when you were, because probably high school is different.
Yes.
But when you're young, like what was your normal school day like?
Yeah, I mean, my mom was a public school teacher when she first graduated college, so she was so excited to homeschool her kids because she hated the public school system, and she was like, I get to take all the benefits of being educated in a classical, traditional manner and take them home, where they get my worldview and they get Christian values and they get to learn faster and at their own pace. So when I was younger, it was my mom, we would pick a time. It was usually 9 a.m. right after breakfast. We'd sit at the dining room table and we would just teach. We would get a curriculum that had all the subjects lined up together, so they all correlated. What we were learning in math correlated with what we were learning in Bible, and my mom would just sit there and teach. We sat there probably from 9 to 12. We ate lunch and then resumed after a nap at 2. So it was basically a full day. But we got to learn so much more than just, your math, your literature, your science, your history, right? A lot of it mixed in was we'd do scripture memorization, and we'd do cooking and baking. And if there was anything I specifically liked to learn, like I'd like to read. So my mom would give me a book reading challenge like every week, or I'd have to read aloud to her for a certain amount of time. Or we were really able to customize it. But my mom was very involved probably from before school to 8th grade. So my mom would sit down and teach me the entire time for a billion hours a day until we went to go do the billion other things that we did that were extracurricular outside of the home.
Right. We'll talk about that later too. And then high school, how did it change in high school?
In high school, freshman year, my mom was like, I want you to learn discipline and independence and self-accountability. And she was like, I want you to learn how to become a good steward of your education and of your time. And so my mom would give me my own curriculum, all my textbooks. I'd teach myself. I'd read the teacher textbooks. I'd learn the material. I'd take the tests. And then every week my mom would look through the stuff I did, look through the stuff I read, maybe quiz me if she thought I lied. And then that's how we did it every week. So I kind of taught myself from freshman year to senior year.
Just so cool. I love that.
Yeah. And so what is a homeschool day look like for you? And so I know that yours has switched. Well, and there's not one way to, this is what I want to talk about. There's so many ways to do this.
I love it because I think too, I have some friends who are a lot like that, and I always hear that, and I'm so inspired, and I'm like, gosh, I kind of want to be more like that. And then I try, and
my mom was a special breed.
Yeah, well, and I have friends who teach that way, and they thrive in it, and their kids thrive in it. Mm-hmm. And I tried for like a week. We were not thriving. We were crying. And so we're a little more, I wish I was more structured, but I'm a little bit more, so what I did was I read, when we first started homeschooling, I panic read about 8 books in 4 months. I hadn't read a book in a long time. And I read all these books, and I kept being drawn to these unschooling books. And I thought unschooling was for lazy people. And so, so I started reading these books, and what I loved about them was that they showed research that kids who are unschooled, literally, they have no curriculum throughout their entire childhood. And one thing I did see was that they struggled with time management in college, and that was the only downside. And so I think what I really appreciated about these books was not so much that I wanted to be an unschooler. I need more structure than that. Mm-hmm. I can't be super structured, but I can't be just, we tried it, and that didn't work for us either. So we've kind of found somewhere in the middle, but I appreciated those books because it showed research that these kids turned out fine.
Right.
So that showed me, even if I do a few things, as far as curriculum goes, my kids will be fine.
Yeah.
They'll know what they need to know. They can learn it when they need to learn it. And that's also my story. I didn't graduate high school. My dad pulled us out of school because of the Christian school we were going to in the little town we lived in. They didn't have the credentials for high school. So I was doing, and back then we didn't have the online like we do now, so I had to mail in my test.
Or anything, yeah.
It was a tiny town, so I had to they'd mail me my books. I'd take the test. I was not motivated enough. My parents were both working, and so it was a mess. So my dad said, forget it. And so I never went past my freshman year. And I look at myself now, and I can write, I can spell, I can do these things just as well as my husband, who went to college for 5 years.
Right.
And so I see that, and I go, you know what? I don't have to teach them everything. I can teach them things that we're interested in, things I think are important. We have a math curriculum that we do. But it just gave me peace of mind. All these unschooling books, even though I don't want to go that far, they gave me such peace of mind. I can do this, even uneducated. I wasn't a teacher at one point in my life. Mm-hmm. I didn't even graduate high school.
Well, you weren't formally educated. Let's put that, because that's you have been spending your entire life educating. You're talking about reading books and doing all of these things,
yeah,
right?
And that too. We never stop learning, and so that was kind of an eye opener for me too. Is I don't have to teach them all this by the time they're 18.
Right.
It's lifelong, and so I just want to teach them to love learning, and you can always learn when you need to.
Right.
I don't know. It's just been such a cool, very eye-opening.
And even with like formal schools, you have kind of Montessori.
Yeah.
The Montessori method is a lot like
which is very
unschooling,
cool.
right? Where it's not exactly, but it's where it's very student-directed, where you're offering them things and they find that. So there is even, and a lot of the Montessoris for younger students are very popular for that reason, because it gives them autonomy and they're learning to love learning.
To explore and
yes.
Yeah.
And I kind of did a mix of all of those things. So I started off, I was a teacher. I have a master's degree in education, and I had to unschool myself. When I first started, I'm like, I had in my head that we had to do all these hours a day and do all these things. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me one day, why? Like, why do we have to do it this way? Why does it have to be structured? The reason that it's structured that way is because you have 30 kids in a room.
Yes.
That are at all different levels. And you've got to, and there's so much time that's wasted in school. I know that for a fact from teaching. There's so much of your day is spent getting everyone on the same page, going to the bathroom, walking
right, and
to
it's
class.
not the teacher's fault. It's just what they're...
Yeah, because you have a lot of people. And so to try to get, 30 adults doing the same thing at the same time, it takes a long time, let alone kids. Yep. So there is a lot of wasted time built in to where I had to kind of get over myself, because I realized, okay, we can, especially in younger grades, I'm like, we're doing all this stuff and we're done in 2 hours, and we're totally done with everything. It's like, wait a minute, that didn't take very long at all. And we got a lot more done in that short period of time. And so when my kids were young, we did some structured stuff that we did. I had a little bit different of an issue, because my kids are 10 years. There's a 10-year spread between my youngest and my oldest. So they were at very different stages. So I had to kind of get over, figure out how to maneuver around that. Did a lot of self-directed things, had a lot of unstructured play. You and I, Tabitha, were having a conversation about how valuable that is. And I think you had a lot of unstructured play time too.
I did, yeah.
With just go play and just imagine. And some amazing things come out of that time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're building forts and learning, whatever. Just like they use their imagination and they start investigating how to make lotion, or how to, build a rocket, or how
the mental and physical development that happens from them doing those things. We see it as so unimportant, but so much rich development. I've learned in my panic reading, so much rich development happens in that, and it's so valuable.
It really is.
It helped us associate school with fun too.
Yeah,
my mom we do school before lunch. After lunch, we do a little bit of reading time right after nap time. And then my mom would give us, okay, you have this much time to build this, and we go and build it. Or I want you to read this chapter of this book and then write a story about this lady. It really helped me and all my siblings not only learn to associate learning with fun, but learn to associate fun with creativity and exploring and eating mud outside.
And that's real life.
Right.
That's real life.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of things too with having property up north and doing a lot of real life lessons of chickens. So talk about some of those things that because those are valuable things too.
Oh man. So that's probably my favorite thing we've done. So we bought some property, and we right away built a small house on it for my mom. So the kids helped us build the house. My dad, he's the contractor. So right along with us, the kids were driving the tractor. and we built a wall. They were laying block. They were helping me mix concrete. Like it was my favorite, some of my favorite memories. And so we had the freedom to do that because they weren't in school. They were doing whatever we were doing.
And how great is that they've had that experience as kids, right? To do that and to realize, okay, if there's something that we want to do, we can just do it, right? We can figure out what do we need to do whatever the project is, right? And do those things. I know Micah, so my oldest daughter, she loved to do homemaker stuff, right? So anything, she was always concocting things, cooking, doing all. So finally one year in high school, I just gave her like, okay, you're going to do a home ec course. You come up with stuff and just write them out like a lab report, kind of what you did, what the projects were, what supplies you needed, and like we put it in her court. That. She did it online, like on Pinterest or something that she did it. I don't remember now, and just really started exploring like things that she was interested in. And then that's led to like she does sourdough now. She does all these. She has all this stuff on her Instagram page that she does. But she's very much homemaker, traditional. She sewed her own wedding dress, and these were all things that she learned as a kid. Starting from a young age, just having the freedom to develop those things that you're interested in. And then, other ones that we're interested in photography or languages, or, you find things that if they're interested in building things, if they're interested in whatever their interests are, you have that freedom to kind of give them room to find out what they're good at and what they like.
They have the time.
They do, which I think is great. Okay, so with that, let's talk about a couple of the misconceptions. So I'm sure we've all heard this.
Yes.
There's all these things that are like misconceptions about homeschooling, right? So common things that you hear. One of them being, I'm not qualified, right?
Yeah.
So that you're not qualified. I am really the anomaly, and your mom is too, having been a teacher.
Right.
Most of the people that I know that homeschool, that's not the case. But your experience, you were talking a minute ago about not having graduated high school, and that was one of the things that you struggled with, right? Feeling like you weren't equipped. So what do you say about that?
I think I use my dad as an example. I already like what I said about myself, realizing that even being uneducated, I can learn anything I want to learn. And so I don't feel that stress anymore of, I need to know everything so I can teach it to my kids. Mm-hmm. We learn together what I've learned. And I look at my dad. So my dad, he graduated high school, probably barely, and he can do really complicated math because he was a builder. He learned it because he needed to. He didn't go to school to learn how to do that math. He just figured it out as he went because he needed to make a paycheck.
Right.
So all of this kind of was an aha for me, just realizing they don't have to learn all this by the time they're 18 or else. It's right. It's okay.
Or even, okay, they don't have to have learned all X, Y, and Z by the time they're 5 or by the time they're...
From me either.
Right.
That's the beauty of the internet too, is we can learn literally everything. My husband has fixed many things in the last few months because YouTube told him how. So I just feel less and less panic that I'm not qualified enough, and just realizing the resources are out there. And if they're having fun and if they realize that they're capable of figuring out what they need to figure out. And I think that's one of those things that happens in the development of exploring and free time is they learn they can figure things out.
Yeah.
They don't have to have someone teaching it to them and telling them how to figure it out, a teacher or even a parent. They learn by all that free time and exploring I can figure things out on my own. And that's something that was a relief because I'm not going to be able to teach them.
Well, and honestly, everything. I think that just what you said sparked something in my head that really public school was designed to train kids to just follow directions. It's creating, factory workers and cogs that were obedient and just did what they were told and didn't think about stuff outside, which it's gotten worse, I think, in recent years of, you have, and this isn't true across the board, right? Obviously, there are plenty of people who've graduated. I graduated from public school, right? Plenty of people who've graduated from traditional school that are not this way. But school does inhibit that free thinking and creativity, and it teaches you to think this way, to learn specific, and to just take information and regurgitate it, not to think about it and critically think. And you have a whole lot of young adults now who cannot critically think because they just were trained to not critically think.
Right. They're very passionate, but
Yeah.
not great at critical thinking.
Right.
And a lot of them are trained to feel like victims to what they don't know. So they're like, well, I can never learn how to do anything on my own. They never feel like they have to take any initiative to learn anything.
Yeah.
Because
You
they've
know?
always been
They've
taught.
always been told what to do, and they've always
Right.
been taught. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being taught. Nothing wrong with knowing how to follow rules.
Correct.
Nothing wrong with knowing
Right.
the guidelines and how to follow them and how to respect authority. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is something special about being able to be a self-empower, to be like, you know, if I want this to happen, if I want to learn this, if I want to know this, I can go and do it. I can go and learn. I can go and figure it out. That was my favorite thing that my mom taught me in high school was she would just say, go figure it out.
Yeah.
She wouldn't answer my question. She wouldn't tell me the answer to anything. She would just say, go figure it out. You can figure it
Right.
out. And she always knew the answer, but I always learned how to figure it out. And that ended up giving me so much more wisdom and knowledge than if she would have just told me.
Huge.
Me learning how to go figure it out actually helps me into adulthood with opening a bank account and doing like the stupid normal stuff, like opening a bank account and figuring out how to do stuff to my car, how to turn the brights off in my car, like all that stupid normal adult stuff. Like being taught as a young kid to just go figure it out really helps me out in academically and non-academically. Like it helped me out in every area.
And I think that's something that you can do even if you're, if you're listening and your kids are in school, they're in a traditional school. Those are things we can do at home regardless of where they go to school. And there are some schools who do focus on critical thinking. Again, it's, there's a whole gamut of it, but I think just generally speaking, you do have to see a lot more of that with kids that were homeschooled. Okay, so this question is for you.
Perfect.
About kids being weird and unsocialized, right? That homeschooling, you don't have any.
It makes you like a social outcast to be
and
homeschooled.
You're just, a weird, unsocialized homeschooler, right? So,
so embarrassing.
What do you say to that, Lilly Orta?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, I love being social. I love talking to people. I have no problem chatting with anybody. And as a kid, that was because my mom forced me to chat with a bunch of people. I wasn't allowed to be shy. That wasn't allowed. That wasn't a thing that was allowed. Shy wasn't a thing. Like my mom was like, you're not shy. Like that's not how that works. Homeschoolers are not weird. They're only weird if you raise them to be weird. I always did normal things as a kid. The only normal thing I did not do was go to school. I did everything else. I went to church. I went to youth group. Like I was involved in a dance studio very heavily. Like I did normal kid things, and I would always tell people I was homeschooled and they'd be like, oh my gosh, I thought homeschoolers were always so weird. Like they couldn't talk to people and, they sat in the corner by themselves. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like I know very few homeschoolers that are actually like that because they have so much opportunity to be around their parents. And so they often learn the socialization of their parents. My parents are both very chatty people. They like to yap. They like to talk. They're both very social people. And that's just how I was raised. I was raised to talk to people. I was raised to hang out with people. And I was raised like a normal child. I knew how to play normal games. I did normal things. The only thing that was a little bit different is my shorts were like 5 inches longer. And that was the only thing that was different about me growing up.
Which there's nothing wrong with that either.
There wasn't when I was like 8. But like my shorts were just longer. That was the only thing that could have, by the naked eye, that's the only way you could have seen that anything was different. But I went to church. I did junior Bible quiz. I did all the stuff that normal kids do.
Yeah.
It's not, it didn't dramatically alter the way I grew up socially. I know how to talk to people. I'm pretty normal, I would think. Decently normal. My shorts are shorter now. I just think it's such a sad little lie that's been spread around that homeschooling makes kids weird, that it makes them little social outcasts, or it makes them dress in a way that's going to get them rejected by their peers. Like that's really unless you as the parent are deliberately raising your kid to be weird, homeschooling is not going to allow your child to be weird.
I will say though, I got to say about the dressing weird, one thing that I love about homeschool and that I'm finding is they don't know what's trending. And so they don't care, which I really appreciate. So we'll go shoe shopping for my boys and they're not looking for, I don't even know what's trending right now. Maybe someone can tell me, but they don't even, they're just looking for what they like,
right?
What colors they like. And they have no idea about brands. And I love that because they just get to be themselves. with no
Right.
pressure to be anything else. So
Raises them to be confident in
Yeah.
what they like. And
So if
right,
that makes them
right.
weird to somebody else, then I'm okay with that.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
Well,
Doesn't
and
make them weird by the objective standard.
exactly.
this is true. But what I always say too is like sometimes those people, like when you have kids that are just kind of awkward, they would be awkward whether they were at
Exactly.
homeschooled or in public school
On the objective scale, yeah.
Because again, like you have awkward parents that raise awkward kids, and I don't think that has anything to do with homeschooling.
Or parents that like raise their kids telling them they're shy or telling them they don't have to talk to
Right.
people because you're an introvert and you're
Yeah.
shy.
Like
Like,
they don't have to be polite.
yeah, you don't have to be polite. You're shy.
Still have
You-
to be polite.
Right. So you have all of the
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things that I said to somebody recently, which was like kind of an aha moment for me that I hadn't really thought through, but when I said it, I was like, wow, that's really actually very accurate.
Yeah.
Is that it's weird to spend your entire day with people exactly the same age
Yes.
as you.
Yeah.
Like that's weird if you think about it. Like in your life right now, right? You're sitting here with us who are, older than you and different decades older than you. You're around kids, you're around adults, you're around older people, right? Like my average day, I'm around a whole wide range of ages of people.
Right.
It's weird to be with only 12-year-olds all day long. Like that's not normal. That's not real life. And so when you get out into the real world, if that's all you're used to, you don't know how to talk to younger kids or how to talk to adults or how to, interact with people that are not your age.
Right.
And it creates a lot of that dynamic that you were talking about the social pressures and the things that are there. So I said that one day and to somebody, and I was like, wow, that's actually really good. I'm going to remember that and say it again later.
Well, my mom growing up, she was always like, if you don't learn how to talk to adults, you're like being set up for failure.
Yeah.
So my mom was like, of course my mom taught me how to be sweet to kids and how to take care of a kid, how to be careful with the kids. But as I got when I was like 5 or 6 years old, my mom would like introduce me to adults that she was talking to at church, like on Sundays. She'd introduce me to the adults and she'd have me tell them about what I learned in school or just something random. So I learned how to talk to those who were younger than me and those who were older than me. And as I'm entering maybe into 11 and 12, my early teenage years, a lot of adults would just be so surprised to see a young teenager who was not only confident enough to make eye contact with them and shake their hand, but who knew how to engage in conversation with them.
Right.
And, I got to learn how to be good with kids, to be interested in what kids were interested in and, have fun little conversations with them and teach them how to do cartwheels. Like I was taught to do all the fun things with the younger kids and the mature, polite things with the older people. So I was able to connect with people of any age demographic, meaning I could never be limited socially by how old or how young people I talked to were, because I was taught how to be confident enough to chat with everybody, because I had the time and the mom who was willing to put in the time to allow me to be like that.
And when you're homeschooled, you're going to the grocery store, you're running
Like
errands with
Monday
mom.
morning at 9 a.m. Yeah.
So you're talking to people of all ages all the time. Yeah.
This is the other side benefit of homeschooling is you can go to the zoo on a random Tuesday morning when nobody's there and you have the whole place to yourself.
Oh my goodness.
That's an extra bonus.
Actually, a friend of mine just pulled her kids last week from school. And she texted me today and she's like, we're at the mall. And I was like,
You get to go to the mall at the prime time.
Yes,
Literally
nobody's
nobody's there. Oh my goodness.
We did that with like Disney World too, back before Disney was so horrible that,
You could go to
feel
vacation
guilty
anytime you
mentioning it,
wanted.
but-
Yeah.
Right, you can go places off season and do things that are fun. But yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and cheaper,
Yes.
right? So, okay, so another thing too, let's go back. I'll ask you this question because you kind of alluded to this before, Tabitha, but about kids being behind from where they should be, right? That's one of the things that, okay, I know this is one of the things that parents stress about. Your average parent that's going to homeschool, it's like they're worried that their kids are going to be behind, that they're not going to, know how to do what they're supposed to do at certain times in life. And you kind of alluded to that before. You talked about that, but what do you say to that about
that's
like
one
the
of my
schedule?
favorite things to talk about is these arbitrary like timelines that we've given to kids. Someone just made it up and they had to for the school system so that they could track things and they would have data and they could get money where they needed to get it. Like they had to do it this way. And so when you bring your kids home, I read this book. It's hands down my favorite book. And anybody who starts asking me questions about homeschool, if their kids are 8 and under, I tell them Better Late Than Early by Raymond and Dorothy Moore. And it has all the research in there that talks about how kids are not even physically, but they're not emotionally and mentally ready for formal learning. And like if you think about even their bones in their fingers aren't fully developed yet, so we're having them hold pencils at 5 years old and write their name. And so all of this was like, it just kind of made me realize we've forced kids into these boxes and said, this is when you need to know this is when you need to know this, or you're behind. And now kids think there's something wrong with me because that kid's 5 too, or that kid's 10 and they could do it faster, so something's wrong with me. Well, my teacher said I didn't get a high enough grade, and it really shoots kids' self-esteem down. And when you realize where those grades and the grading system came from and why it's there, it's not for the kids. So once I discovered that, again, in my panic reading, it was so freeing, because I don't worry about whether or not my 7-year-old can read the same as a 7-year-old who's in school. I know that I know the development that's happening as she learns on her own and she discovers things on her own, and in a time that, not that it's not, because I think sometimes too, that's where I'm not totally unschooling, because a lot of times they're like everything in their own time. And I think as Christians too, we are called to train up our children. There's an element of training that needs to go into childhood. So kind of finding that place of where I feel like, okay, now it's time to push a little. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we don't do it. But also being able to say, you know what, it's not fun yet, and I think I want to wait a little bit longer when she's excited about it, and I can do that.
Right, you have freedom.
And I think the hardest thing is the pride of, well, people are going to think I'm not doing my job, I'm not doing a good job, I'm not equipped to do this because my kid is behind in certain areas where kids in school are not. And that's where I want to show them all this research and say, that's just because a kid knows something doesn't mean they developed what they were supposed to in order to get to that.
Yeah.
And so I love allowing them to do these things in their own time, if I can just get my pride out of the way and not worry about what it looks like to other people.
Right.
So.
And I think too, with that, it's like, you do have some, feel like it's more of a rarity, but that you do have some parents that really are not taking it seriously and not doing what they need to do. And we do, I've known families that their kids really are not learning anything because they're not actually homeschooling them. Yeah. But that's an anomaly. I feel like that's really rare to happen. Most of it is on the other end, where parents are spending so much time and effort burning out, worrying about what their kids are doing. Yeah. And am I doing this right? And there's so much self-doubt on the part of the parents that there's no way those kids are not going to be learning, because the parents are really, they take it very seriously. Yeah. And what I always tell parents when they're getting ready to start, I think I probably said this to you, but it's like you don't have to be trained to teach your own kids, because as a mother, you're doing that all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, we know our kids. We know the way that they learn. We know what works with them. We know those things better than a stranger does to know that. Whatever the topic is that we're learning, we can learn that ourselves. We can figure that out, like what we talked about a minute ago. You can figure that stuff out and pick up books and find things online to learn, how do I teach writing, or how do I teach, math, or also find other places. There's lots of classes, there's lots of co-ops, there's lots of places where you can go and fill in those things if it's something that you don't want to do. If you don't want to do science experiments on your kitchen table, you can sign them up for a science class somewhere, right? Which is how I got into doing the Christian classes that we're doing now. It was for writing and science, because writing, I'm a good writer, but my kids were personally offended by my suggestions on their writing, and it just became okay, I don't want to. They're crying and okay, this is not good, because they're getting personally offended by by the fact that I think this should be capitalized, or whatever the case was, right? It's it's really not a gray area. It's there's no verb in that sentence, but for some reason that was very hurtful to hear. So I was like, it's better to hear from someone else.
else.
So, when you, and same with science, I was saying that we had the big gap in ages. So, what my older one was needing to learn was different from what the younger one. And I always had these great intentions of doing science, and that never actually happened. Like, I just never got to it. I didn't buy the stuff, or I bought it and it sat in a cabinet for months. And I'm like, oh, crud, I meant to do this thing. So, again, that's where you can sign them up for classes, sign them up for PE classes. There's different things that you can supplement, which is just one of the beauties of homeschooling.
And if you don't have the money, you can always find other friends who homeschool and trade. And we have a friend who's amazing at baking, and so she brings the kids over and they bake cakes, and there's science.
Right. No, that is great because we did that as well.
Yeah, so you just kind of trade around and.
Mm-hmm. There's lots of ways to get that stuff. If there's something that you don't like to do or feel like you can't do, that you can supplement, find someone to help you with, grandpa, neighbor down the street, whatever. Like, you can find people to help you with those things. And then, so one other thing with that is college, getting into college, which clearly you were unable to get into college as a poor, uneducated homeschooler. Lilly, right?
Getting in. Weird with shorts too long, trying to get into
Your
college.
long shorts.
Yeah,
go away. We don't want you here.
Yeah, sorry. You and your shorts can leave. Yes, I did get into college. Yeah. The only problem was my mom couldn't figure out how to do a high school transcript, which you actually helped her out with. So I was like, as a senior in high school, I'm 16. And I was like, Mom, this is going to be terrible. I'm not going to be able to graduate because you don't know how to do my transcript. But she figured it out. But yeah, I did community college for a year. My parents wanted me to kind of get out there a little bit and kind of see what other people were learning and how that kind of went. And it was a terrible experience.
Was it really?
But a terrible experience, and that it was so sad, my community college year. But I learned a lot, not from my classes, but from watching the other people there and kind of learning from them. So I did get accepted into this college, which is like a Southeastern University branch, which is like this university in Florida. And I've been doing decently well. Like, my mom raised me to have good grades. So my grades haven't ever been super terrible, and made it into college, and I'm alive. And
you were just real quick, because we're running low on time here. And you had, you talked about having people in your classes that came out of traditional schooling that did not know what they were doing. Right?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Tell
yes.
one of those stories.
It happened in a lot of classes, but the one I think of the most is with this community college I went to, they required you to take a math class your first semester there. It was just one thing they did. And they had 3 intro mathematics classes, and I just took the hardest one because I was like, it's probably going to be difficult math, but I was like, it'll teach me something. I was never a math girl growing up, and I was like, I'll just take a hard math class and it'll be fine. I walk in the first day, and I'm the only homeschooler there. All of these kids went to public school. And the girl in front of me, she was 29, and she was in community college. And, I'm chatting it up with her, talking about this class, and I'm like, I'm kind of scared. I think it'll be hard. And she's like, I think it's going to be hard too, Professor walks in. The first thing we did first day was number line. We did like the number line, like, how do you add, how do you subtract on the number line? And I was like, I did this in first grade. I was like, okay, I'm thinking it's April Fools, we're going to learn something difficult. I ended up, the hardest thing we ever did was adding and subtracting fractions. It's the hardest thing we did in the entire class. I helped all the students around me. The girl in front of me had never done division before, and she graduated like a public high school. The guy behind me was from Canada. He graduated from public high school in Canada. I had to teach him how to multiply. He had never multiplied before. And I graduated with, I got out of that class. I had a 100 in that class because the hardest thing we did was adding and subtracting fractions. And I'm not a math girl, and I can add and subtract fractions. I had a 100. The second highest grade in my class was a 70. So the dissonance between me, I'm not a math genius. I can divide. And that's the extent of my math expertise. Like, the fact that my grade, I'm not a math girl, was so much higher than all these other kids who were having to stay after class and ask questions. She's teaching subtraction, and they're staying after and asking questions, and they don't understand how to turn their homework in, and it's all textbook, and they don't understand how to write certain equations. Like, it kind of blew my mind. And I remember coming home to my mom and being like, Mom, that was the craziest, saddest thing I've ever experienced in my life. just to see that there was such a big dissonance between, again, my mom didn't raise me to be a genius. I'm not a genius in any capacity. I know the probably appropriate amount of stuff that I should know at my age.
To get by, yeah.
But to see, people who were so much older than me, who were missing all of what I grew up to know was just crucial knowledge. Like, of course you should know how to divide. Like, it was just so sad to see that. Yeah. And that they all came from public schools and they all graduated, and half of them were like, yeah, I got good grades in high school. And I was like, well, then how do you not know how to divide?
That's crazy.
You know what I mean? It was just such a big dissonance. It was just so sad to see. I never thought that would be something. That was one of the biggest eye-opening things about being out in the real world, was I was like, shoot, like I was so blessed to grow up in the education that I did, where my mom let me go as ahead as I wanted, or she would keep me back when I didn't understand something until I really understood it. And she taught me so much crucial knowledge that I didn't realize so many other kids just didn't have.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know that's the case with my 3 oldest all graduated high school, went to college, got scholarships and internships in college, graduated college, all of them at the top of their, like literally all of them were at the top of their class in different schools, different. So, and again, not everyone needs to go to college, but if you want to go to college, there's nothing preventing you from going to college as a homeschooler. And in a lot of ways, one of the stats that I had on here was that colleges are recruiting homeschoolers because they do better. They're better at self-management. They're better at knowing how to juggle life and do those things. They don't go crazy when they go to the school and, party and not turn in their homework because they know how to self-manage. And then just one last thing before we go, I just want to add in that if you're trying to homeschool, you either need to sign up. You can sign up to get ESA money, or you sign up to get the homeschool affidavit. You do one or the other. I'm going to post some things in the links in the comment section. But ESA, you'll have to look up that website because I don't remember what it is. But there's also AFE is a great AFHE.org. It's Arizona Federation for Homeschool Education. So AFHE.org has all kinds of information on co-ops, on how to do your homeschool affidavit. It's just sort of the one-stop shop for getting started homeschooling if you want to get started.
And they have an incredible conference every year in July.
Yes, they have a great conference, lots of speakers, a whole entire room full of curriculum that you can get your hands on and look through. And there's lots of Facebook groups and other groups of park days and co-ops and communities that homeschool to help get you started. So really just what we wanted to talk about today. And also too, so this election is really going to be important because there are people in office right now who would love, Arizona is a great place to homeschool because we have a lot of freedom in Arizona, a lot of, across the country, people are homeschooling like crazy numbers. That's just growing and growing across the country. But in Arizona, we have really great laws. They keep trying to say that ESA money is stealing from public education, but a report just recently came out that shows that is actually not true, that we're saving the state money even with ESAs, because the money that they're spending on per student in the classroom is way more than the money that they're sending for kids to educate at home. You can do it a lot cheaper on your own at home, and they get a better education that way in a lot of cases. But that's one of the first things that there are a lot of people in office right now, and they're trying to get in office. They would love to get rid of all of our school choice and force everyone to be in public education and not have the option to use ESAs to go to Christian school or to use ESAs to go homeschool or even just to pay your own and homeschool on your own, which is how we did it for such a long time before ESA was a thing. All of my kids.
How devastating for kids. Like my friend I was talking about who just pulled her kids, it's because of severe bullying.
Right.
And the fact that she has the freedom right now to say, you know what, I'm going to bring them home and I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
Because the bullying went on for 5 years. And so she has that freedom here in Arizona to say, all right, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And to lose that for some kids will be devastating.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think just to wrap up here, that you can, if you're interested in trying to do it, be brave, find some friends, do it. There's no one size fits all. There's no one way to do it. There's a lot of, homeschooling can look like a lot of different things. It doesn't have to look like somebody else's homeschool day. You know your kids, you love them. You were equipped by God to parent them, and that includes teaching them and figuring out how to do that. So we just want to say, go you go do it. You can do it. And there are lots of places to help. If you want to ask me for help, come track me down and I'll help you get started homeschooling. But this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
You can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify and follow us on social media. Find all the info on the show notes. To learn more about Dream City Church, visit our website at dreamcitychurch.us. Thanks for listening.